The Galactic Dominion had ruled the stars for over 10,000 years. A vast empire of countless species, it prided itself on order, on control, and most of all, on conquest. When humanity refused to kneel, the Dominion responded the same way it always had, with fire. Earth was gone, reduced to cosmic ash, its oceans vaporized, its cities erased in a storm of plasma and orbital bombardment. The fleets that had once defended the cradle of mankind were shattered, their wreckage drifting lifelessly in the void. Survivors were hunted down, enslaved, or forced to fight as entertainment in Dominion arenas. The Dominion believed it had exterminated humanity as a power, that no force of man could ever rise again. They were wrong. Far beyond the Dominion's reach, past the mapped edges of the Perseus expanse, a fleet drifted in the shadows. Cloaked from scanners, silent as the void itself, it watched and waited. At the center of the fleet, aboard the battlecruiser Iron Requiem, a lone man stood at the bridge, staring at the tactical display before him. Admiral Darius Vex. His face was sharp with purpose, his dark eyes carrying the weight of a war long lost. Once, he had commanded the last human fleet at the Battle of Sol, fighting to the bitter end as the Dominion closed in. When his flagship was crippled and his forces annihilated, the Dominion had declared him dead. That had been their greatest mistake. Darius had survived, dragged from the wreckage by a handful of loyalists. For years, they had worked in secret, striking at the edges of Dominion space, raiding convoys, stealing technology. Every Dominion patrol that ventured too far from safety disappeared into the void, their wreckage found weeks later, if at all. It was never enough. 1,000 skirmishes meant nothing against an empire that spanned the stars. He needed more. He needed an army, a fleet capable of striking at the very heart of the Dominion. And now, the time had come. Targets confirmed. A voice called from the console beside him. It was Lieutenant Mira Kale, one of the few survivors from the old Terran fleet. Her blue eyes flickered with the glow of the display as she zoomed in on a Dominion supply convoy moving through the Zephyr Drift. 4 cargo haulers, 3 escort frigates, 1 light destroyer. Standard formation. Darius exhaled. Good. That destroyer. What class? Calarash pattern. Mira responded. Medium shielding. Heavy plasma batteries, weak points along the aft ventral thrusters. If we strike from below, they won't have enough time to redirect power. A smile ghosted across Darius's lips. It had been a long time since he heard someone speak with that level of tactical precision. He turned to the holomap. Zephyr Drift was a treacherous region, dense asteroid fields, and violent electrical storms. Dominion ships usually avoided it, but the convoy had no choice. It was a direct supply route to Zenith Prime, the Dominion's most fortified military outpost in the sector. Taking out this convoy wouldn't just be another raid. It would be a message. Darius straightened. We engage in 5 minutes. Full strike formation. No survivors. A murmur of approval rippled through the bridge crew. These weren't just soldiers. They were revenants, ghosts of a fallen people, fighting for vengeance in the cold abyss. And tonight, the Dominion would remember why humanity had once been feared. The stars above Zephyr Drift flickered as the Dominion convoy sailed through the asteroid field, its formation tight. Cargo haulers carried critical supplies, fuel cores, weapon stockpiles, and raw materials, all bound for Zenith Prime, the Dominion's most fortified stronghold in the sector. Escorting them were 3 Tarlek-class frigates, their sleek insectoid hulls bristling with plasma turrets, and a single Calarash destroyer, its reinforced plating making it the convoy's heaviest gunship. A standard patrol routine. They had no idea they were being hunted. From the black void beyond the asteroids, hidden beneath layers of electromagnetic interference, Iron Requiem lay in wait. Admiral Darius Vex stood at the command bridge, watching the convoy's movements with cold precision. The enemy was cautious, keeping their ships tight together. But caution would not save them. Darius turned to Lieutenant Mira Kale. Status of the fleet. All ships are in position, she confirmed. Stealth field holding. They still don't see us. Darius nodded. Good. He opened the fleet-wide channel. All units, prepare to engage. We strike fast. We strike hard. No mercy. A chorus of acknowledgments filled the bridge. Darius turned back to the holomap, his mind already playing out the battle before it began. The Dominion relied on overwhelming force, massive fleets, endless reserves, brute power, but brute force had blind spots. His fleet had been built from the wreckage of humanity's war. Salvaged Dominion warships, repurposed with human ingenuity. They were faster, more precise, smarter. And tonight, they would remind the galaxy that humanity was not extinct. He raised his hand. Engage. From the shadows of the asteroid field, the first wave of Revenant ships burst into real space. Hellfire-class corvettes streaked forward, their sleek hulls slipping through the convoy scanning range before the Dominion even knew they were there. The lead Tarlac frigate had just enough time to register the incoming signatures before. Boom. A railgun round, fired at near-light speed, punched through the frigate's reactor core. The ship detonated in a violent bloom of fire and debris, its shattered hull spinning into the void. Panic erupted in the Dominion formation. The remaining 2 frigates scrambled to adjust, plasma turrets swiveling toward the ambush. But before they could fire, a second wave of Revenant bombers screamed in from above. Torpedoes locked. Fired. Impact. The second frigate's engines erupted in a chain reaction, sending the ship into a death spiral before it slammed into a nearby asteroid, splintering into nothing. The third frigate fired wildly into the darkness, its plasma rounds tearing through empty space. Darius smirked. They're shooting blind. Then the destroyer moved. The Kalarash-class gunship was no mere escort. It was a hunter designed for brawls. The moment the ambush began, its captain had rerouted all power to shields and launched defensive drones. A swarm of autonomous sentries deployed into the fray, locking onto the human ships and returning fire with deadly accuracy. Blue plasma fire streaked through the battlefield, forcing Darius's forces to break formation. Darius didn't flinch. He had planned for this. He turned to Mira. Bring the Revenant forward. Target the destroyer's ventral thrusters. Mira nodded, relaying the order. Seconds later, a mid-sized battlecruiser, the Revenant, emerged from the asteroid field at full speed. It was a monstrosity of a ship, an abomination of salvaged Dominion and Terran tech, covered in jagged plating and reinforced armor. It moved like a predator, sleek and fast, heading straight for the destroyer. The Kalarash captain saw it too late. Krak boom. A hypervelocity rail shot from the Revenant tore through the destroyer's underbelly, right where its engines connected to the power core. The ship shuddered violently, its shielding flickering out in a cascade of energy. Darius seized the moment. Iron Requiem, full broadside. Now. From the flagship's hull, ion cannons discharged in a wave of white-hot light. They ripped through the destroyer's defenses, leaving it exposed. Then the finishing blow. A barrage of tactical nukes, fired from the Revenant's torpedo bays. The Kalarash destroyer, once an apex predator, was ripped apart in a blinding explosion. Debris spiraled in every direction, scattering like cosmic dust. The battle was over. The cargo haulers, defenseless, and without their escorts, broadcasted desperate surrender signals. Darius watched the wreckage drift through space, his expression unreadable. He opened the fleet-wide channel. Spare no one. The Dominion had shown humanity no mercy at Earth. He would show them none in return. Within minutes, the haulers were obliterated. Not a single Dominion survivor left to warn the others. Darius exhaled, looking at the battlefield. Another victory, another step toward vengeance. But this was only the beginning. The Dominion would notice, and when they came hunting, he would be ready. The destruction of the convoy sent shockwaves through Dominion space. Zenith Prime, the sector's most fortified military outpost, was left crippled without its supplies. Fleet logistics were thrown into chaos. A mere raid had forced a war machine that spanned thousands of worlds to stall. And worse, the ghosts had returned. On Korak Vivi, a Dominion war world wreathed in constant storms, the High Council of the Dominion convened in secret. Their elite warlords and strategists debated fiercely, demanding to know how such an attack had succeeded. Only one voice cut through the noise. Overlord Xirak, the Butcher of Earth. A towering monstrosity of a warlord, his exoskeletal armor gleamed under the chamber's dim red light. He had led the final assault on Earth, personally overseeing its extermination. No one questioned his authority. His four mandibles twitched in irritation as he reviewed the reports. Admiral Darius Vex, a name he had not spoken in years, a name that should have been nothing but dust. And yet, the man lived. Xirak's claws dug into the metal of his throne. He would not allow this. The humans think themselves predators, he rumbled, his voice like grinding stone. They are insects, scurrying in the dark, and like all insects, they will burn. The warlords of the council murmured their approval. Xirak turned to his personal intelligence officer, a thin, calculating creature from the Dominion's Rekar intelligence caste. What do we know of their movements? The Rekar bowed low. Minimal. They strike from the void and vanish before pursuit. But we have traced patterns in their raids. A supply world, Veltris 4, recently intercepted rebel transmissions. They seek something hidden within its vaults. Xirak's mandibles curled into something resembling a smile. A trap then, he decided. Veltris 4, the lure of old Earth. Darius studied the intercepted transmission aboard Iron Requiem, standing at the center of his dimly lit war room. The Dominion had always sought to erase humanity, but they had kept some things. Relics, archives, trophies from their conquest. And now, on Veltris 4, a Dominion-controlled fortress world, there was something worth taking. The data was vague, but one word stood out: Genesis Vault. Darius turned to Lieutenant Mira Kale, who had once been one of Earth's finest intelligence officers. What do you make of it? Mira frowned, arms crossed. The Dominion never keeps old human tech unless they see value in it. If they've held on to something this long, it must be powerful. Darius exhaled slowly. If the vault contained pre-war human weapons, A data, or fleet schematics, it could change everything. A risk, a trap, but one he had to take. We strike at dawn, he ordered. The ambush. When Darius's fleet arrived at Veltris 4, it looked almost too easy. The Dominion defenses were thin, with only a few orbital turrets guarding the planet. No heavy patrols, no reinforcements. The perfect opportunity. Darius led the strike team himself, descending to the surface aboard a dropship, his soldiers armed with pulse rifles and plasma blades. The Dominion never saw them coming. They breached the vault within minutes, storming through automated defenses. Inside, they found stasis chambers, old Terran artifacts, weapon prototypes never deployed before Earth fell. And yet, something was wrong. Mira's brows furrowed as she scanned the vault's logs. This place was recently accessed. Darius's blood ran cold. It was a setup. The moment the realization struck, the sky above Veltris 4 ignited. A Dominion fleet burst into real space, 10 times the size of anything Darius had faced before. The trap had been sprung, and waiting at the helm of the flagship was the one nightmare Darius had never wanted to face again. Overlord Xirak. The Butcher had come for his head. The moment Overlord Xirak's fleet dropped from real space, the atmosphere above Veltris 4 ignited with orbital fire. Darius Vex had been in battles before, but never like this. 100 warships, their alien hulls gleaming under the planet's twin suns, moved in precise formation. Dreadnoughts, destroyers, interceptors, not a mere patrol, not a standard Dominion fleet, a hunting party. For him, Darius clenched his fists. I walked straight into it. Inside the Genesis vault, red emergency lights pulsed as klaxons blared. Time was running out. Mirakel's voice snapped him back to the present. Darius, we need to move. Now. He turned to his strike team. 24 soldiers, the best of what remained of humanity. Their armor was mismatched, salvaged from 100 battlefields, but their resolve was unbreakable. Darius exhaled sharply. Focus. Survive. Adapt. Everyone to the extraction point, he ordered. Mira, contact Iron Requiem. Tell them. A thunderous impact rocked the vault. The ceiling cracked, debris falling in thick chunks as something massive slammed into the surface above. Then came the voice. Overlord Xirak. Deep. Monstrous. A sound humanity had not heard since Earth burned. Darius Vex. His name echoed through the vault, carried by the Dominion's Hive communication network, broadcasting through their suits, their ships. You have spent years scurrying through the void, killing my kind, defying the inevitable. Darius gritted his teeth, gripping his rifle. Xirak's voice grew cold. No more. The vault doors exploded inward. A shockwave of concussive energy hurled Darius and his team back as armored Dominion enforcers poured in, 8-foot-tall warriors, their exoskeletal plating reinforced with energy shields. Heavy infantry. Kill squads. The first two opened fire, blue plasma bolts shrieking through the air. Darius rolled to cover behind a fallen pillar, gripping his rifle. Return fire. His team answered with fury. Pulse rounds and ion bursts lit up the chamber, cutting down the first wave of enforcers. Explosions rocked the vault as grenades detonated, sending Dominion bodies sprawling. Darius fired 3 precise shots, hitting a Rakkar sniper in the throat before it could line up a kill. But then, the second wave came. More Dominion soldiers stormed in, their movements fast and relentless. Shock troopers with plasma blades leaped into the fray, cutting through 2 of Darius's men before they could react. Mira shouted, "We can't hold them." She was right. They were being overwhelmed. Darius knew the Dominion's tactics. They didn't just want to kill him. They wanted to capture him. To break him. Not today. Darius activated his exosuit's thrusters, jetting forward at full speed. He smashed into an enforcer, tackling the towering warrior before firing a point-blank shot through its skull. He spun, tossing a high-impact explosive toward a cluster of enemies. Detonating. The blast ripped through the vault, sending Dominion bodies flying. That was their chance. Mira, go. His team sprinted toward the extraction tunnel, weaving through collapsing corridors. Above them, the vault structure was failing. The Dominion fleet was glassing the surface, burning everything to trap them inside. They burst onto the surface, right into hell. The sky burns. The skies over Valtris IV were on fire. Iron Requiem and its fleet fought desperately, battling against impossible odds. Darius's flagship weaved through dreadnought fire, its railguns punching through Dominion cruisers, but they were outnumbered 10-1. The Revenant, their secondary battleship, was already burning, its hull splitting apart in the atmosphere. And then, Darius saw him, Overlord Xirak. The Dominion Warlord stood atop a landing craft, staring down at Darius from across the battlefield. The Butcher of Earth had come in person. Xirak leaped from the craft, landing like a meteor before Darius. His armor gleamed, his forearms flexing as his mandibles curled into something resembling a grin. At last, Darius barely had time to react before Xirak moved. A blur of motion, a wall of muscle and death. The Overlord slammed into Darius, hitting him like a warhammer. His chitinous claws gripped Darius's arm, twisting, breaking. Pain exploded through Darius's body as he crashed to the ground. Xirak loomed over him. "You die here, human." Darius's vision swam. Blood filled his mouth. He looked up at the sky, Iron Requiem was still there, still fighting. His people. His war wasn't over. He activated the failsafe on his wrist computer. A signal. From above, the Requiem's main railgun charged. Fired. The blast struck the ground between them, obliterating everything. Darius was thrown back, tumbling into the extraction zone, his vision flickering. Through the smoke, Mira's arms wrapped around him, dragging him onto the AVAC shuttle. We have him. Go. The shuttle engines roared to life, streaking into the burning sky. Below, Shrek rose from the crater, his mandibles clicking in fury. Darius had escaped. For now. But the war had changed. The Butcher of Earth was hunting him. And next time, there would be no escape. The fires of Valtrersfor had barely cooled before Overlord Serac unleashed his fury upon the sector. Darius Vex had escaped. The last human warlord had slipped through his claws once more. And for that, the galaxy would suffer. Xurak stood aboard his flagship, the Tyrant's Maw, watching the Dominion fleet reform in perfect discipline. Around him, his warlords stood in silent fear, waiting for his judgment. The Butcher's mandibles twitched as he examined a holographic projection of Darius's fleet. Damage, retreating, but not destroyed. That was unacceptable. Xurak turned to his second-in-command, a hulking Vorik enforcer named Xurax the Unyielding. I want his allies burned, Akshirak commanded. Every system that harbors them, every shipyard that resupplies them, eradicated. Xurax bowed deeply, slamming his clawed fist against his chest. It will be done, Overlord. Xurak turned back to the void, his slitted eyes narrowing. Darius Vex will watch as his people die screaming. A storm of fire. In the days that followed, the galaxy trembled. The Dominion fleet moved like an unstoppable tide, crushing anything that so much as whispered Darius's name. On the colony world of Harrow's Rest, Dominion drop pods rained from the sky, disgorging hordes of enforcers. The human settlers, many of them former refugees, had no military, only repurposed mining lasers and rusted pulse rifles. They fought. They died. And when the last defender fell, Xurak ordered the planet's atmosphere ignited, turning its cities into a world-spanning inferno. There would be no survivors. Word spread quickly. Other resistance enclaves fell in rapid succession. The planet Graveson 12, a hidden supply base, was bombarded from orbit. Its shipyards turned to slag. The free port of New Antioch, which had secretly harbored Darius's wounded, was stormed in the night, its people dragged from their homes and executed in the streets. Everywhere, the same message was sent: shelter the humans, and you will suffer. The noose was tightening. Darius Vex's rebellion was bleeding out. The call to war. Aboard Iron Requiem, Darius sat in the dim glow of the war room, staring at the holomap of Dominion movements. His broken arm was wrapped in a nanoweave cast, but the pain barely registered. Mira Kale stood beside him, her expression grim. We lost 5 key outposts this week alone. If this continues, there won't be a rebellion left to fight with. Darius exhaled sharply. He had seen the Dominion's brutality before, but this was personal. Xurak wasn't just hunting him. He was making a statement. You are alone. You cannot win. But Xurak had miscalculated. He had shown the galaxy what Dominion rule truly meant. And now, Darius would use that fear against them. Mira folded her arms. If we don't act soon, we'll be the ones running. Darius's expression hardened. Then we stop running. He turned to the war map, inputting new coordinates. A new target. The shipyards of Stalvor, one of the Dominion's largest military production facilities. If they could cripple it, they could buy time. If they could take it, they could turn the enemy's weapons against them. Darius faced his officers, the fire of vengeance burning in his eyes. Xurak thinks he's hunting me. His voice was calm, cold. He's wrong. Darius clenched his fist. We're going to make the butcher bleed. The HFY shipyards were more than just a military facility. They were the lifeblood of the Dominion war machine, a vast orbital complex spanning the upper atmosphere of a gas giant, churning out warships at an industrial scale. If Darius could cripple it, the Dominion's fleet production would suffer a crippling blow. If he could take it, he would turn the enemy's weapons against them. But this was not a simple raid. This was war. The assault begins. The Iron Requiem and its fleet emerged from warp in perfect formation, their arrival masked by the storm-churned magnetic fields of the gas giant. 20 warships, all that remained of the rebellion's armada, rushed forward at full burn. The Dominion defenses reacted instantly. Automated gun platforms spun to life, unleashing torrents of energy fire. Guardian frigates peeled away from their docking clamps, moving to intercept. Alarms blared aboard the Iron Requiem as Mira Kale relayed the battlefield data. We've been spotted. 15 Dominion warships inbound. Darius did not hesitate. All fighters, launch. Frigates, form a spearhead. We break their lines before they can call for reinforcements. The battle erupted in a maelstrom of fire and steel. Darius's strike force plunged into the chaos, weaving between flak explosions as their heavy railguns tore into enemy hulls. Pulse laser fire streaked through the void, lighting up the darkness with every impact. The Requiem's main cannons roared, sending a shockwave of destruction that crippled the first enemy battleship. The Dominion counterattacked with brutal precision. A squadron of Hunter-class interceptors screamed through the battlefield, shredding through Darius's fighter wings. The Revenant, a rebellion destroyer, was gutted by torpedoes, its wreckage spiraling toward the gas giant below. They were taking losses, but they were pushing forward, infiltrating the shipyards. As the fleet battled in orbit, Darius led a strike team onto the station itself. They breached the outer hull with a controlled detonation, storming inside with pulse rifles at the ready. The corridors shook as emergency sirens blared. Dominion security forces poured in from all directions, their exoskeletal armor reflecting the red warning lights. The first wave of enforcers charged, towering warriors armed with plasma halberds. Darius moved first, ducking low and firing a burst into an enforcer's neck, dropping it instantly. Mira took down another with a snapshot to the eye, while the rest of the squad pushed forward with relentless precision. They fought their way to the command center, securing the station's main controls. Mira hacked into the Dominion systems, her fingers flying across the console. I've got access to their shipyard network. We can override production protocols, turn their own warships against them. Darius smirked. Exactly what he had planned. Do it, he ordered. Mira activated the override. Across the station, half-built Dominion warships came to life. But instead of responding to Dominion commands, they turned their weapons on their masters. The station was in chaos. Victory was in sight, until the comms crackled, and a familiar voice filled the channel. The butcher arrives. Darius Vex. The deep, grinding voice sent a cold chill through the command center. Overlord Xirak. Darius turned to the holofeed. The Tyrant's Maw, Xirak's personal flagship, had just entered real space, and it was not alone. A fleet of 50 Dominion warships dropped from warp behind it. Rebellion forces had been outnumbered before, but never like this. Mira's eyes widened. We have to pull out. Darius exhaled, his mind racing. Xirak hadn't just come to win. He had come to end this war. Darius refused to let that happen. Not yet, he said. We still have control of the shipyard's fleet. He turned to Mira. Send a signal to the Dominion ships still docked. Activate emergency launch protocols. Mira hesitated, then nodded. Across the station, hundreds of docked Dominion ships, some half-complete, others fully armed, suddenly powered up. Their engines roared to life. Xirak's fleet had expected a crippled rebellion. They were about to face an armada. Darius activated his comm. All ships, engage. The final battle had begun. The Exalvor shipyards burned as the final battle began. Darius's fleet, once outgunned and desperate, had just turned into a surging armada. Hundreds of commandeered Dominion warships, some half-built, others fully armed, launched into the void, their targeting systems reprogrammed. They weren't reinforcements. They were weapons of vengeance. The Tyrant's Maw led the Dominion fleet, Overlord Xerak's personal warship, cutting through the chaos like a predator. Darius watched from the bridge of Iron Requiem, his fist clenched. "This is it," Mira said, breathless. Darius nodded. It was victory or extinction. The battle ignites. The void erupted with fire and fury. Reprogrammed Dominion warships, many still in dry dock minutes ago, opened fire on their former masters. Heavy plasma rounds and railgun slugs tore through enemy cruisers. Shockwaves rippled through the battlefield as ships detonated in massive fireballs. But the Dominion fleet did not break. They adapted. Xerak's commanders rerouted control to override some of the hijacked ships. Scorched Earth protocols activated. Some Dominion warships self-destructed rather than be used against their own. The battlefield became a graveyard of steel and fire. But Darius had planned for this. All squadrons form a wedge formation. We cut straight to the Maw. The Iron Requiem led the charge, plowing through the Dominion lines, its heavy cannons gutting enemy warships as it advanced. Flanking destroyers covered its sides, their pulse turrets shredding through fighters. Then, a shockwave rippled across the sector. Darius looked to the viewport. A Dominion warship the size of a city had just exploded. A chain reaction followed, one after another. Dominion ships detonated in rapid succession. Mira's voice cracked with disbelief. What the hell just happened? Darius realized. Xerak had just sacrificed part of his own fleet, not to retreat, to clear the battlefield for his final move. And then, a colossal energy spike. The Tyrant's Maw charged its primary weapon, a planet cracker cannon normally used for orbital bombardment. Darius barely had time to react. Evasive maneuvers. The cannon fired. A blinding beam of annihilation ripped through space, slicing through 3 Rebellion warships in an instant. One of the stolen Dominion battleships, under Darius's control, was hit head-on. It didn't explode. It disintegrated. The Maw's weapon was designed to erase worlds, and Xerak had just turned it on them. Mira's voice came through the chaos. "We can't win a war of attrition. We have to take out the Maw." Darius's mind raced. The Tyrant's Maw was built to withstand entire planetary sieges. No single ship could destroy it. But he wasn't a single ship. He was Darius Vex, and he had an armada of stolen Dominion warships. A final gambit. Darius opened a fleet-wide comm. "All remaining ships, this is Darius Vex." The chaos of battle faded for just a moment. He took a breath. We were never supposed to survive this war. He looked out at the flames, the wreckage, the bodies floating in the void. They burned our worlds. They slaughtered our people. They told us we were nothing. His fingers tightened into a fist. But today, we make history. He turned to Mira. "Send the override codes." Mira's eyes widened. "You're going to." Now. She pressed the command. Every stolen Dominion warship, hundreds of vessels, large and small, received their final order. They rerouted all remaining power to their engines. A doomed fleet of ghost ships. Target: Tyrant's Maw. Xerak realized the danger too late. The hijacked warships surged forward. Autopilot locked onto collision vectors. The Dominion warlord's voice boomed through the battlefield. No. The first Dominion dreadnought crashed into the Maw, its impact ripping open its lower decks. Then came the second. Then the third. Then dozens more. A wave of burning, screaming steel smashed into the Maw, piercing its invincible hull. A chain reaction of explosions ripped through its superstructure. The planet cracker cannon overloaded, its energy core collapsing in on itself. The maw began to break apart. Darius exhaled. It's over. But then, through the flames, through the smoke, Xurak survived. The Butcher's last stand. Xurak's personal drop pod crashed onto the shipyard surface. He emerged from the wreckage, his massive form wreathed in fire and fury. Darius and his strike team barely had time to react. Xurak charged like a beast, slamming into the ground with enough force to crack the platform. His forearms flexed, mandibles twitching in pure, raw hatred. You think this is victory? Xurak growled, his deep voice like a war drum. Darius raised his plasma rifle, but Xurak moved too fast. The Butcher of Earth ripped the weapon from his hands and hurled him backward. Darius hit the ground hard, coughing up blood. Xurak loomed over him. This war does not end until I tear the heart from your chest. Darius wiped the blood from his lip. Then he smiled. Come and try. The final duel had begun. The wreckage of Stalvor burned around them as the final battle came down to two warriors. Darius Vex, the last human warlord, stood on the ruined shipyard platform, blood dripping from his lip, his body aching from the impact. Facing him, Overlord Xurak loomed, a titanic figure of armored exoskeleton and raw muscle. His forearms flexed, claws gleaming under the crimson light of the burning station. The Butcher of Earth had survived his fleet's destruction. Now he would end this war with his bare hands. Darius pushed himself up, rolling his shoulders, his breath steady despite the pain. Xurak stalked forward, his mandibles twitching in pure contempt. You are nothing, the warlord growled. Just another worm struggling in the dark. Darius wiped blood from his mouth and smiled. Then come step on me, you oversized cockroach. The Butcher strikes. Xurak lunged with terrifying speed. His clawed upper arms slashed down, aiming to tear Darius apart. Darius sidestepped at the last second, ducking low as the Butcher's strike shattered the platform behind him. Metal shrieked, sparks flying as the floor buckled under Xurak's raw strength. Darius lashed out, plunging a combat knife into Xurak's side. The blade barely pierced the warlord's exoskeletal armor. With a snarl, Xurak backhanded Darius with one of his lower arms, sending him skidding across the platform. Pain flared through Darius's ribs. Something cracked. But he forced himself up. He had to keep moving. Xurak came at him again, faster this time. Darius dodged a second time, but not completely. A claw raked across his side, cutting deep, but he gritted his teeth against the pain. He had faced death before. He wasn't going to die here. Fighting smarter. Darius knew he couldn't win in a contest of brute strength. Xurak was bigger, stronger, faster. But Darius was human, and humans didn't win by being stronger. They won by being smarter. As Xurak charged again, Darius rolled backward, grabbing a fallen Dominion soldier's pulse grenade. At the last second, he flung it directly at Xurak's feet. Boom! The explosion ripped through the deck, knocking the warlord off balance. Darius rushed forward, drawing his sidearm. 3 precise shots slammed into Xurak's exposed throat, where his exoskeleton was weakest. The warlord roared in fury, staggering back. Blood poured from the wounds, but he refused to fall. Xurak grabbed a massive shard of wreckage and swung it like a club. Darius barely ducked in time, feeling the wind from the attack nearly take his head off. But now, Xurak was furious, and anger made him predictable. The killing blow. Darius saw his chance. Xurak lunged for a final killing strike, but Darius rolled under him, dodging the fatal blow by a hair. As he came up behind the warlord, he seized a broken Dominion spear from the ground. And with all his strength, he drove it upward, right into Xurak's chest. The spear pierced the warlord's second heart, sinking deep into his body. Xurak staggered, his claws grasping at the weapon in shock. His 4 red eyes widened. Darius stood before him, breathing hard, his own blood mixing with the warlords. "Tell your gods," Darius whispered, "that humanity sends its regards." With a final, brutal twist, he ripped the spear free. Xerac collapsed to his knees, gasping. Then the Butcher of Earth fell, and he did not rise again. The war ends. Silence fell over the ruined shipyard. The battle in orbit was over. The Dominion fleet, leaderless and broken, had begun to retreat. Mira and the remaining strike team rushed to Darius's side, helping him up. He could barely stand, but he grinned through the pain. "It's done," Mira whispered. Darius looked down at Xerac's lifeless form, a monster that had once terrorized the galaxy. Now just a corpse. "No," Darius corrected. "It's just begun." Epilogue: The dawn of a new age. News of Xerac's death spread like wildfire. The Dominion, once an unbreakable empire, fractured overnight. Without their warlord, their grip on the galaxy weakened. Rebellion forces rose up across the stars, and Darius Vex became more than just a warlord. He became a legend. Some would call him a hero, others a conqueror. But one thing was certain: the age of Dominion rule was over, and the era of humanity's rise had begun.